ain't see me, you Stevie. Wondering how I reach more evolutions than Eevee and make it look easy.
What is up, Earth's mightiest subscribers? It's Blerd without fear. Welcome back to the channel. All right, so today's video, we're going to be talking about X-Men Forever #4, written by Kieran Gillen, with art by Luca Maresca and color by Federico Blee. This issue wraps up everything kind of nice and neat, though I will say, for it to be the final issue of X-Men Forever, it does end on a rather open-ended note, maybe a little too open-ended for some people, but we do get a lot of really good, what I feel is good character development for Destiny, and technically Mystique by proxy, but it's really, the focus here is more on Destiny and the quest to, save her relationship with Mystique, to come to grips with why she feels the way she feels about looking into the future and seeing Mystique die in every single possible reality. And in some ways, we're also witnessing Sinister's trajectory in trying to figure out what is going to be his place in the wake of the fall of X coming to its inevitable conclusion, and where will he be during the From the Ashes era's kickoff. Now, another aspect of this as well is we also get to learn a little bit more about Hope's mother, a character who we have largely never spent any time with whatsoever, and we've only really kind of heard her talked about in past tense up until the previous issue of X-Men Forever #3 is really the first time we'd really seen her in any present day format where she wasn't already dead and burned to a crisp. So there's that. The other instance here too is we're gonna also learn a little bit more about what is the future of the Phoenix, and that is pretty much what the story kind of needed to do. It's wrapping everything up. Everything is, I will say, it is moving at breakneck pace, and I've said this for pretty much everything going on with the X-Men as of late. But that said, getting into, once again, Kieran Gillen's doing a great job, though I do feel this is rushed, and I'm not changing my opinion there. Going on to the art department side of it, Luca Maresca and Federico Blee have been doing a fantastic job, as I've been saying in previous issues. Art's very consistent, color is very consistent, everything looks exactly as it should. Say what you will about the state of X-Men comics at this particular point in Fall of X, one thing I will definitely say is that, for the most part, they have all looked really damn good. Getting into the spoiler territory of it, let's start with where we begin, and that is going to be with Destiny. Now, as we have learned in the previous issue, Destiny is upset because she is afraid that Mystique is going off to die because she has seen the future. She can see every inevitable possibility. She knows that no matter what happens, Mystique is going to her death, and she doesn't want that. And Mystique is upset with Destiny because she feels like Destiny is trying so hard to protect her that she's not allowing Mystique to be who she needs to be in this moment. And that is to fight for her family, to fight for the future of mutant kind. And if she can't do it because of fear that she might possibly lose her life, that's not a life that Mystique wants to live. She doesn't want to live a life where she feels like she's limited or caged. And that's what Destiny has made her feel like. But here, it's where Sinister kind of helps put some perspective on Destiny's abilities, and leave it to Sinister, a guy who is very intimately familiar with the building blocks of mutant genetics and DNA. He knows probably more than most, and I would dare say is the foremost expert on mutant genetics in all of the Marvel Comics universe. So it would make sense that maybe he has a little bit better of a handle on how Destiny's powers actually work. And basically what he reveals, Destiny's love for Mystique is manipulating her visions, essentially saying that there are other possibilities out there. It's not like Avengers Endgame, that this is the one potential future where everything just happens to work out perfectly. No, it's not like that. There are other possibilities. She's just too close to the situation. Her love for Mystique is clouding her visions to the point where she's only focusing on the bad ones. Her focus on this is obscuring her ability to see the actual positive futures. And this is what kind of opens Destiny up to realizing that she's been in the wrong. She has been out of pocket on this whole thing. And that there's even maybe a little bit of a hint that maybe if she would have had this information ahead of time, like, I don't know, maybe back during the events of X-Men Blue Origins #1, maybe she would have made a different choice and maybe not have had to, give up her son Nightcrawler, or, have to have her memory wiped in the first place so that Nightcrawler becomes the exact person he needs to become, and, Mystique doesn't have to go through all this craziness, Destiny doesn't have to go through all this craziness. It's not explicitly stated out loud, but I mean, if you have eyes to see, I feel it's kind of obvious. But at the end of the day, we know that all's going to work out well because Destiny is going to get her memories back, even though technically I feel like that scene, it felt very rushed. I feel like maybe we might have needed one more issue here to kind of really flesh this out. But I mean, yeah, at the end of the day, they're able to get to Xavier, albeit right before, Mystique is about to get completely sent to the gulag by Nimrod, of which there are 3 of them. While that is, dealt away with pretty easily thanks to characters like Manifold, which just kind of reiterates why it was so important to Moira to make sure all teleporters were off the table. It just all comes back to Destiny getting her memories from Xavier and then them just riding off into the sunset, and Destiny being able to embrace Nightcrawler the way that she has always wanted to, but has not been able to up until this point. And of course, we know we are getting like a big wedding special coming up here before too long, though, as I often like to point out with wedding specials in X-Men comics, really in comics in general, but specifically in X-Men comics, they don't usually go the way you think they're gonna go. So I would hope that this goes more the route of, yes, they actually do get married. I really hope they don't pull the whole X-Men Gold deal where it was supposed to be Kitty Pryde and Colossus getting married, and then all of a sudden, boom, out of nowhere, nope, we're not getting married, but hey, Gambit and Rogar. Yeah, I hope they don't go that route with it. Like, if they do anything, I would be, at the very least, happy if Mystique and Destiny actually get their true wedding, but also I wouldn't be upset if they kind of did a whole thing where maybe Iron Man and Emma Frost actually went ahead and cemented those vows, like actually for real, for real. I mean, technically they did do it for real, but do it again, like as a renew your vows type of deal. But I don't know, we'll have to wait and see on that one. I honestly don't know. I haven't really seen too much far ahead. I'm not really foreseeing how that relationship is going to work out long term. As far as the next thing goes, that's going to be what's going on with Hope Summers. In the previous video, I talked about how I felt what Enigma might try to do is to try to be the father of Hope Summers, so that way he can ensure that his genetic structure is in Hope, so that way he would be able to remote pilot her while she's in the white hot room in the future. And while it did seem kind of like a far-fetched thing, and I even kind of thought back on it after I posted the video, I was like, man, I don't know, man, that was kind of dumb. I probably was overthinking this shit, and I saw some of y'all kind of tell me something along those same lines. Well, as it turns out, I was right. It was me all along. I was the one. So yeah, there you go. Here's the thing about that, and what I like about how this is handled is it's all kind of happening in real time, and this is an opportunity for us to get to know Hope's mother in a way that I feel, yeah, we never really have. And I talked about this in the previous video for X-Men Forever #3. We've never seen Hope's mom outside of talking about her in past tense and memories and things of that nature. We really only saw her like the one time, like before X-Men Forever #3. We had really only seen her in a present tense setting. It's when she was found dead at the hands of the Purifiers. So this was a pretty interesting thing. And also to learn a little bit more about her personality, to see kind of where Hope gets her shit from, you know what I'm saying? Like her attitude, like it's not just a Cable thing. Her mother was the exact same way for the most part. Even Jean has to point it out. But even before Jean says anything, but just how Luis was interacting with Enigma prior to Jean Grey's presence being felt, it was very on brand. It felt like a grown-up Hope Summers, and it made sense. What this does ultimately is if Enigma, who for a split second before Jean intervenes, it does seem like Enigma actually got what he wanted, because we see at a point in the white hot room, Hope starts to show the crown on her forehead. You're basically letting you know she's been taken over by Enigma, that what he was doing was already changing the timeline. But Jean is able to step in and kind of help push that to the side. Granted, it is about roughly when Jean shows up that Luis is actually like, yeah, this kind of isn't right. But I like the fact that once she realizes what's at stake, once she sees what it is ultimately that Jean is fighting for her to avoid in regards to Enigma, that she's on board. I like how that goes. And in doing this, this basically helps solidify the starting point for the Phoenix. Now, one thing you have to take into consideration, the Phoenix is a being that has existed since time immemorial, early in Marvel Comics history. So the fact that like this has kind of become her starting point, but is also her end point, it's kind of weird, but the best way to look at it is that for all intents and purposes, Jean has closed the loop. And the reason I say that is because the Phoenix is a entity that revolves around a life and death cycle. And while technically it was at the end of that cycle and the loop was broken, Jean going to Louise in the past and keeping her from allowing Enigma to impregnate her, this entire moment helped close the loop. It solidified the birth of Hope Summers. Quotey fingers mentally impregnating the Phoenix in Louise Spaulding. Like, not what I mean, not in a physical sense, like in a mental sense. The idea of the Phoenix, the memories and knowledge and all the other stuff. Louise isn't going to remember anything, but it's kind of something similar in what I feel to what Xavier did to Moira in Rise of the Powers of 10. He put an idea in Moira's head, and it's something that we're not going to see play out until the end of this whole thing. And that's kind of what Jean has done here, but for less weird reasons. She has basically put into Louise Spaulding the spark that will ignite the inferno of Hope Summers, closing the loop, solidifying the timeline and all that it entails, the chain of life, death, rebirth, ending, all that stuff. And now the Phoenix has what is effectively a new starting point, one that is still eternal and doesn't negate any of the previous stuff regarding the Phoenix, but just ensures that the Phoenix always exists, and in a way kind of makes Hope to the Phoenix what she already was to mutant society in regards being the sign of change to come regarding mutant birth rates. But in order for all this to work, it's going to take a lot more than Jean implanting that idea of the Phoenix into Louise's mind. It's going to require Hope actually sacrificing herself and attacking the Phoenix kind of as what we knew was going to happen, using Legion in what is effectively the Hope Sword form, but also in the guise of an actual gun that would be more comfortable for Hope to use. She blasts the Phoenix pretty much into oblivion, but at the same time, the Phoenix, dying in a blaze of inferno and glory, consumes Hope as well. And in this act of death, this is what's going to kickstart the rebirth of the Phoenix itself. Now, of course, in this means Hope is technically gone. She is dead and yet not dead. She has become part of the Phoenix Force itself and basically the spark of it, for all intents and purposes, becoming one with the Phoenix Force. And I feel like this is something that will probably be touched upon more when we get to Stephanie Williams' Jean Grey series. I think that's going to be something that gets talked about more over there, if it gets talked about at all. But the idea of her becoming one with the Phoenix is very special, just in the sense that, you know, she has in a lot of ways become a messiah not once but twice. It's kind of funny when you think about the fact that like all this time, you know, when we were doing like the Way of X stuff, you know, Nightcrawler was trying to start a mutant religion, trying to find the spark, and I feel like that was a storyline that kind of got dropped or, you know, kind of left in the cold. And now it kind of seems like, man, maybe this is where that should have ultimately gone, or I don't know if this was the in game the whole time. But yeah, the idea of Hope becoming that very thing, she was the very thing that kickstarted mutant birth rates back into the to being a thing again after an age of there no longer being any mutant births at all. Now the Phoenix gets to live once more and continue its cycle of life and death and rebirth, and it's kind of all at her sacrifice. But at the same time, it's a sacrifice that I feel Hope was already willing to make in the previous issue, when she was ready to give herself up in order to kickstart the Phoenix back into its cycle. Now she's done it in a somewhat different way, and kind of in a lot of ways maybe even achieved better results, because now Jean is the Phoenix again. I mean, technically she already was, but you know, now Hope is in a lot of ways going to always be with her, you know, and is always going to be intrinsically tied to the Phoenix Force, and may eventually someday return. That's kind of something Exodus hints at, that she's become a part of the Word. Pretty cool to think about. Like, I mean, it's crazy and weird, and I'm not a religious person by any stretch of the imagination, so a lot of this is not necessarily lost on me. I grew up religious, but I became very anti-religion as I got older. But you know, when I got in like my 20s, 30s, give or take. I kind of really just kind of dead set into that. It's still something that like I can relate to, but it's not something I'm just kind of like, ooh wee, this is so great. I like it though for a storytelling device though. The good news is that the Phoenix is back. Jean has it. Now the Phoenix is not at full strength, and something that is hinted at just by the fact that the Phoenix says itself that it's ready to do its job to take out the Dominion, and more importantly, that they must feed to build their strength. I get a feeling we're gonna see the Phoenix run roughshod through whatever is left of Orcus, maybe even Nimrod and Omega Sentinel, before ultimately taking on Enigma himself. The other stuff here is great too. We get to see kind of, I think, what is a taste of things to come with the From the Ashes era. Like, I know a lot of people are sad that Krakoa is not going to be a thing, but the thing I have often said is I think Krakoa is not going away. Not in the way that I think people think it is. I think Krakoa will always exist in the White Hot Room. I think that Krakoa will be a thing that is separate from the rest of reality, and will be the place where there are mutants who will exist and thrive and live in peace and happiness in a way that maybe Krakoa was supposed to be from jump, but just in the prime material plane of the Marvel Comics universe just was not possible. And that aspect of it is both sad and happy at the same time for me. And I've even said that you're talking about some of the From the Ashes stuff, that I wouldn't be surprised if later on we do go back to see mutants on Krakoa, even if it is in the prime material plane of Marvel. But I think that them being in the White Hot Room is not the worst thing in the world. They would be absolutely safe there because really mutants are the only ones who can go to it. But that said, we get to see Kafka, a character who was more recently introduced post Hellfire Gala, and we saw in the previous issue that Exodus was basically kind of coaching Kafka up, telling Kafka what they needed to hear, that Krakoa needed to happen, that it needed to be a thing, and that nothing that has occurred thus far is going to undo what ultimately is. And I also feel like kind of instilling that wisdom that Exodus has that I would say often is kind of forgotten about sometimes, because Exodus is such a zealot, but also instilling in Kafka the confidence and the knowledge that is going to be necessary for Kafka to become the voice. And I won't necessarily say the sole leader, because I feel like there's some very particular wording used towards the end of this issue where Kafka says, "We are the new Quiet Council now," when everyone's arguing about what's next. What is the next move? What do we do? Do we stay here? Where do we go? How do we live? How do we survive? He is the one who steps up and shuts the whole thing down and says, no, we are the people. We are the ones who are going to have to dictate how we move going forward. And then bit by bit starts breaking down all the things that they need to do to try to create a new mutant society. Once again, Krakoa's not over. It's just not going to be what it was. When you talk about the death of something, and I use this example all the time. A lot of times when you say the death of something, or they say the fall of something more often, it doesn't necessarily mean that thing is done and dusted and will never be talked about again. What is usually being talked about is change, because that is what death means in a more traditional sense, not like in a literal sense. It means change, moving on from one state of being to the next state of being. And I think that's what Krakoa is going to be. And honestly, I think it, as I said before, is probably the better way to go. But hey, I'm just a dude who talks about comics here on YouTube. I don't know shit. My opinion is one of a but many. So please, by all means, tell me what you think. You guessed it, obligatory channel outro time. If you're not subscribed to the channel, consider doing so. Clicking that subscribe button and tapping that notification bell ensures that you get more videos just like this one, and you don't miss any of my other content that I drop throughout the week, plus my live streams every Thursday and Saturday. And if you enjoyed the video, make sure you click that like button, keep it plus ultra, and sound off in the comments.